Om Sahanā-Vavatu Sahanā Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai. Om Namah Shivaya. Okay. So we're continuing with the first part of this book, the discussion of the philosophy that Shankara shares. And we had discussed the aphorism, reality, and what Vedanta is about in terms of the seeking of the real reality, the underlying reality. And we had discussed yesterday that, and we'll bring some of the scientific understanding, discoveries and understanding in today as well. But what we discussed yesterday, that the great search within physics is the unifying theory, what's called the unifying theory, or the theory of everything. What it is that explains the behavior of the small, the subatomic, and the behavior of the large, the atomic and greater. And as we discussed, they seem to be two different worlds, but somehow it is understood that that there has to be, I shouldn't say somehow, it is understood that the small, however, is underlying the large. So, so the large, even though it appears a certain way, is actually not the way it appears. And that's what brings us into this discussion of Maya. We'll read a little bit from Swamiji and discuss more. So he says, thus, and he's introducing Maya in the book. It says, Maya, a statement of fact as well as principle. It says, thus, according to Shankara, the world of thought and matter has a phenomenal or relative existence and is superimposed upon Brahman. Again, if we draw the parallel from modern science, what we see is that the large has a phenomenal or relative existence relative to the small. And the large is actually superimposed upon the small. This concept of superimposition in Vedanta, we work with a few different approaches to that, to aphorisms or ways to consider what is this superimposition. Snake in the rope is one of the most common, one of the most popular. So probably even everyone joining us has heard the one, but just in case. Concept of superimposition is there's a thing, but something else is seen, and so it's superimposed upon. And the example given is the snake and the rope. And the story is that we're walking along in the dusk time, and we see a snake, and of course, whatever happens, we jump, we yell in ecstasy, whatever it is. But then we have the double take, and we look at it again, and we see, it's not a snake, it's a rope. And so the snake, which never really existed, we can ask the question, where was it? And the answer has to be, it was a thought. And did the snake exist? The answer is going to be, no, the snake didn't exist. Some people would say it existed as a thought. Okay, fine. But that also was fleeting. The snake itself really didn't exist. There was delusion about it. Yeah. But was there an underlying existence? And the answer has to be yes. The underlying existence in this case was the rope. And so the snake was superimposed upon the rope. The rope was what was real in this circumstance. And the snake, which we saw, which seemed to be real and was not, was superimposed upon it. So we can't say, again, please forgive the language, because we can say anything. But it would not be accurate to say that the snake had no existence. But it is accurate to say there was no snake. So it's neither real nor unreal. Yeah? Yeah. So the snake didn't exist. But there was an existence which was taken to be a snake. And there had to be an existence taken to be a snake in order to see the snake. Had there been nothing there? So here, this world of thought and matter is what he's sharing, has an existence, but it doesn't have an independent existence. And this is a concept we were discussing yesterday. Okay. But its existence, the phenomena, is superimposed upon Brahman. This is what Shankara is saying. Where science would say, superimposed upon the small, in some way not understood. And Brahman, in this case, the word is denoting, pointing to the unique absolute reality. So he says, as long as we remain in ignorance, that is, as long as we have not achieved transcendental consciousness, as long as we've not come to see or to know or to have the relationship with Brahman, with the absolute, with the reality, as long as this is so, then we shall continue to experience this apparent world, which is the effect of superimposition. When transcendental consciousness is achieved, superimposition ceases. And we were discussing some yesterday as well. And we used some of the example that Swami Sarvapriyananda had shared the night before. Right? What is the nature of this superimposition? So what is it? What is this power or this factor that is causing this superimposition? Because the philosophy is sharing that effectively all of us are seeing what we call world. And yet both science and the Vedantins would say, correctly it seems, that there actually is no world. The physicist would say that what there is waves of energy, strings or waves, like that. And what the Vedantin says is there is Brahman. And both would agree there's not actually a world, that the world is a phenomenon, that all of these objects are phenomena, owing their reality to that which is deeper. How about that? All of us walking around saying this and that. And this is where science, and we can use the word religion, but Vedanta is not really a religion, not in the traditional sense. It is a science. It's an inner science instead of an outer objective science. So what is the nature of it? In the introduction to his commentary on Brahma Sutras, Shankara tells us that the superimposition is the apparent presentation to consciousness by the memory of something previously observed elsewhere. We see a snake, we remember it. Next day, we see a coil of rope. We superimpose the remembered snake upon it and thereby misunderstand its nature. Shankara foresees an objection to his theory and goes on to anticipate and answer it. We may challenge the theory of superimposition by pointing out that Brahman is not an object of perception. How can we superimpose a snake upon a rope which we do not perceive? How can we superimpose a world appearance upon a reality which is not apparent to our senses? And he quotes, "For every man superimposes objects only upon such other objects as are placed before them. That is, as come into contact with his sense organs. To this, Shankara answers, Brahman is not, we reply, non-objective in the absolute sense, for Brahman is the object of the ego idea. We know quite well by intuition that the inner self must exist, since the ego idea is a presentation of the self. Nor is it an absolute rule that objects can be superimposed only upon such other objects as are placed before us. For ignorant people superimpose a dark blue color upon the sky, which is not an object of sense perception. The other, of course, that happens is in the dream world. Superimposition is happening there also. Yeah? Because we see an object in the dream world, yes? And we wake up and we say, what about that object? Was that object real that was in the dream? So last night I saw, I don't know, we don't dream so much, but did you see something in a dream last night? We can say, for example, last night I saw a roller coaster. I remember a dream with a roller coaster in it. So, and then I wake up, and did that roller coaster exist? The answer is no. I can't accurately say that it existed. I can say that there was a thought about it. And so the existence of the roller coaster then was also a superimposition. Upon what? What was the underlying nature, the relative reality upon which the roller coaster was superimposed? Thought, mind stuff. And you can say ultimately consciousness, which is Brahman, yeah. But you can certainly say mind stuff. There was a thought that arose in the form of an image. And that's where the existence of the roller coaster was. So there wasn't actually a roller coaster. Yeah. He's discussing the point about how is it that a world can be superimposed upon something that's not an object. And the point we make is that actually the substance upon which the superimposition is happening, upon which is consciousness itself. In the same way that in the dream, the roller coaster is superimposed upon consciousness itself. Yeah. And then we can have our discussion. And if we want to go there, then we can have our discussion about computer animations and what's the term that we were talking about?
The simulations.
Simulations, computer simulations. So in the same way, a roller coaster or any other object that you choose, some phenomenal world, can exist in a computer as data. Mm-hmm. Yes? Yeah. But with the right equipment hooked up to us and connected to the senses, then there's an entire phenomenal world which arises, which is a superimposition upon the computer program. Yeah, the underlying reality was a computer program. Yeah. Does that make sense for those joining us online as well? In a computer simulation, and if you look at a computer simulation on a computer screen, fine, it doesn't seem like a world, right? You could have an entire world simulated on a computer screen, and you're sitting here and the computer screen is over there, and you look at it and it doesn't seem like superimposition. It seems like a world that only exists on a computer screen. But in this time, it's possible to feed that directly into the brain, as it were. What we have today is equipment that you can strap on, and I don't know if anyone here has done it. I haven't done it. Have you? Okay. But we know that the goggles exist, and we know that the gloves exist, and we know the footies exist. We know all of this. We know that there are these objects that we can purchase in the world, which will bring that world that seems to be on a computer screen into our direct sensory perception. And with direct sensory perception, it doesn't seem to be any different than this phenomenal world here. Is it correct? Yeah. But where does this phenomenal world that is computer generated, where does it exist? It exists as information, as data in a computer, as a computer program. And then, can that be fed directly into the brain? Can it be fed directly into the mind? Now we come back to the matrix, right? Of course, yes. Of course, yes, it can. Of course, yes, it can. And certainly that's being worked out as well. And so on this question of superimposition, can an object or the perception of an object be superimposed upon consciousness or mind stuff or thought? And the answer is yes. Yeah. When and how did this act of superimposition occur? And the philosophy here, what Shankara is saying, is that this world appearance is a phenomenon. When we say Jagat Mithya, it's a phenomenon. It's experienced as world, or it's experienced in other ways as well. To the one who's awake, it's experienced as a phenomenon. Yeah. Not a phenomena of what? A phenomena of Brahman, of the absolute, of consciousness itself. So as Swamiji was saying, it's not that the appearance of the air filter over here disappears. It's not that. It's seen for what it is. It's seen through. Of course, when one sees the rope, one is no longer seeing the snake. In this case, the physical seeing, because the physical eyes are part of the phenomena. As is the physical tongue, as are all of the physical senses, as are the astral senses as well, also part of the phenomena. So what's being shared then is that we're experiencing an apparent world which is superimposed upon what? Upon consciousness. Consciousness itself. And we love the allegories because the computer simulation is something really that we've only been able to work with in the last 30 years. So it's very modern. It's usually not dealt with in the ancient teachings. We bring it here today because it's a good practical way to look at what's being shared. There are other ways as well which seem a little bit more arcane to us, but the computer simulation is a very real example of how an entire world experience, phenomena, can be superimposed upon consciousness. Yeah? What is the mind made of if it's not made of consciousness? So this is exactly what Shankaracharya is saying, is that the entire world appearance is superimposed upon consciousness. Now you may say, well, where is the computer? And who's the programmer? Who's doing this? And how is it hooked up to us? And all of these. And these are perfectly good questions. And this is actually what the author, Swamiji, deals with next. He says, when and how did this act of superimposition occur? Was it at our individual birth or in some previous life? Was there an historical moment corresponding to the story of the fall of Adam at which the phenomenal world came into being as the result of the ego idea? And by the way, the ego idea is being equated to the gloves and the displays that are worn in the goggles on the head to feed direct images of this imaginary world into the eyes, and the gloves that are here to feed the direct perceptions, sensual perceptions, physical perceptions of this imaginary world into the hands and the booties and all of this. This is the ego. This is the ego. This is what the ego does. This is the ego's role, is to take what's real and make it apparent. And so as we dive into the text itself, we'll discuss more of ego and how it's working, but this is what it is. Ego is the booties and this and all of ego itself. Where did this ego come from, and when did it come? At which the phenomenal world came into being as a result of the ego idea. So the philosophy, the phenomenal world comes into being as a result of the ego idea or ego sense. The futility of such questions should be self-evident, Swamiji says. We merely go round in a circle. What is this world appearance? Maya. What causes it? Our ignorance, which is this ego sense. And the ignorance is active, and this will get explored in the text as well. The ignorance is an active ignorance that we suffer from. Again, recognize that those of us who actually study the nature of reality and dive into it, and I was very much a scientist, very much an engineer before all of this. Really, I was what I've always been, will always be, but in terms of the psyche and the way that I approached life, very much like an engineer, as a scientist. Always experimenting with things, always taking things apart. And if you take things apart, you see what they're made of. And this is what the scientist is doing, and this is what the Vedantin is doing, is taking things apart in order to see what they're made of, in order to see what the reality of it is. And so, again, what we're dealing with is life seems one way, world seems one way, but is another. And so, how did it happen? When did it happen? A lot of times this question will get asked. Shankaracharya says, beginningless time. And that the it that happened is the underlying phenomena, first cause of this apparent world. It itself is. So here we are as beings that seem to be worldly and seem to be separate, asking the question, when did this separation happen? And the answer is beginningless time, or it didn't really happen. that the cause of the separation, since it's only apparent, is ignorance. So there's said to be two. By the way, for those of us joining online, I'll post a link. So Maya is a theory, a philosophy, which proposes the creation of the world. There's a concept of creation which is like this: that the world was created, and the world was created by God. And we'll often hear this in the Abrahamic traditions, something like this, even though I would not say that Christ or Allah saw it this way. But what we'll often hear is the world was created as if a sculptor created a work of art, a sculpture. In other words, crafted it somehow, and then stood back from it and admired it. And sometimes we'll hear this in the lore that God stood back from the work and was happy about it and had an appreciation of it, like this. But that makes the unlimited, the infinite, finite, because that defines the infinite to a limited role. In other words, I create the world and then I stand back from it and the world operates on its own, which actually speaks to two realities. And the scientist won't accept that there are two realities, nor will the Vedantin. The Vedantin, the one seeking absolute truth, will say, no, there can't be two realities, because if there are two, one is the phenomena, or both are phenomena, of a deeper reality. It has to be so. It's always so. If there are two gods, then who's the boss? If there are two phenomena, what are they arising from? What's the underlying cause of the phenomenon? And so we get to Advaita Vedanta, which says, no, there cannot be the unlimited, the illimitable, and that which is limited, because that which is limited has to owe its existence to that which is infinite itself. And so that takes us to Maya. And Maya says that this world is superimposition, projection, hologram, like this, different ways of dealing with, from consciousness itself, from the infinite itself. So first it's a philosophy. Secondly, it's a practical reality. It's a practical reality. We can't deny the fact that we all experience a world. We can see that the world that we seem to experience is not the underlying reality, not the real reality. We can see that. And we can develop a deeper relationship with this reality, which makes us, as it were, immunizes us, helps us to see that we are infinite. It makes us immune from birth and death, the sufferings of this world, etc. And we'll discuss some tomorrow morning or Monday morning, the efficacy of the teaching of Vedanta. Why bother? So there's a practical reality, and the practical reality is that life is one way, but it seems another. That's the practical reality of our situation. And as long as we continue to live life the way it seems to be, it's always jarring and it never ends up well. Huh? It seems that I have to put myself first, and yet when I do that, there's never any satisfaction. Yeah? It seems that you and I are separate and different, but when we live that way, then there's never any real love. The love is only ever transactional, temporal. It doesn't really exist, but we long for real love. So when we live in the way it seems, we suffer. But if we discover the deeper reality and live in this way, live as the unity that we are, accept all as my own self, see God everywhere. When this transformation happens, which is very much the inner transformation, then suffering ends. And so when we talk about a practical reality, the practical reality is the world experience is very jarring. It's not satisfying. There's no happiness here. The entirety of the world, you take anything apart, you don't find happiness in it. You grasp it and it doesn't bring happiness. This is the practical situation that we're in. And so understanding that life is not as it seems is necessary. But Maya is this apparent life. It's not just a philosophy. It is the apparent life. It is the seeming life. And the best lectures we've ever heard about Maya are from Swami Vivekananda. And I don't know that his talks were recorded. It's more than 100 years ago, but I do know that they were transcribed. And there are 3 talks from him speaking of Maya as a practical reality and something to be understood as a practical reality, which is very helpful in terms of transcending it, in terms of going beyond it. They're in a book from Swami Vivekananda's talks, and these were his talks when he toured the West, when he came to North America and Europe at the end of the 19th century. And the book is called Jnana Yoga, and I'll come back to, I'll post a link in the discussion here, and I recommend it. There are 3 talks on Maya in that are beautiful reading. We'll move on from Maya. But we'll close with this comment about Maya. There's said to be 2 aspects of Maya. The first is the projection, this quality of superimposition. What's the projector? Ego. And a funny thing about ego is the feeling of separation, and it's also the creator, as it were, of this apparent reality. And we feel separate in the way that Hari, you and I are not one. We're different. And everyone here, that we're different, we're separate. It seems that way. And yet that factor that makes us feel separate is universal. Everyone here has it. And is one factor shared across the entirety of what we call creation. And it's the primal factor. The first cause is this sense of separation. So there's a projection. We take it to be real, independently real. And so there's said to be 2 factors of Maya. The first is the projection itself, hologram, like that. And the second is the delusion, the avidya, the ignorance, where I take myself to be separate from you, separate from God, separate from everything. And the good news is that Shankara would say, and the great philosophers would say, that the projection itself, beginningless, it didn't have a beginning. That was the discussion we were just having. It itself was the beginning. Because before it is simply timelessness. Yeah. Here we have infinite time, but before it is timelessness.
Time is part of the Maya anyway.
Time is part of the Maya anyway.
So
yeah.
Measure with the same.
So you say beginningless time. And when does it end? Endless time. It doesn't have an end either. But the second factor, which is that which makes us to feel separate, makes us to feel as if we are this body, makes us to feel as if we are the desires and the thoughts, makes us to feel incomplete, makes us to feel limited. The second factor is called avidya, ignorance. And the second factor, also beginningless, but it has an end. And that's the best news. It's said to have an end for the one who comes to know, who replaces the ignorance with jnana, with knowledge. And this is very much possible. And here we have images of the saints and sages, some of, But it's very much possible, and the examples are all around us. We wouldn't say it's easy. Someone asked today a beautiful question about, is this really necessary, this understanding of who I am? It's necessary for absolute freedom. The practices that were described are absolutely beautiful practices and so helpful. And they prepare one for absolute freedom. We would say absolutely. There was a question about, I'm practicing this, can I not just practice this? And the answer is yes, you can practice this. The practices are preparing us for this jnana, this knowledge, which frees us from the limitations. The Vedantin would say we've never actually been limited. It just seems as if we are. And this seeming reality is derived from this ego sense, this universal ego sense. So, okay. So we'll move on from Maya tomorrow morning, and we'll close now, right after Hari checks to see if we have comments or questions this morning. Okay? All right, let's close. Short, final prayer and arati. Actually, we can have the full final prayer. We'll have short arati. So page 156. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamam Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamam Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamam Mritat Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Makashi Dukhabhakave Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mritor Ma Mritam Gamaya Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purnamudashate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchitananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember thee. Let us ever sing thy glories. Let thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in thee forever and ever. Below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. For all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai.